This that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but their stories should be heard. Yeah, every voice matters, we should rise and fall together. And that's why here at Progressive Insider.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Woke Wednesday. Boy, do we have a show for you this morning, and it's full of snark and a lot of fun, as well as always some educational pieces. So good morning to Greensboro. This is the first time that we are streaming live on the DLF page, and we know that your home base is Greensboro, North Carolina. So hello, North Carolina. And for everyone else, when you're joining us this morning, we do see most of the comments and questions that come in, not all of them, depending on where it's been shared to. So if you want to jump in with a comment or critique, some snarky insult, if you happen to be a MAGA person, we're all for it. Join the conversation. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my lovely and talented co-host, Andy Kennedy. Hi, Andy.
Good morning, Carrie, and I would just like to say that I'm excited about restreaming to a new page. The only problem is, the only thing I know about North Carolina is that it's north of South Carolina.
East Coast. So it's East Coast, and it's below the Mason-Dixon line. So everybody there is just as pleasant as can be.
That's pie.
Right. And if you ever hear the phrase, bless your heart, it's not a compliment. So it's, yeah. So
I get that a lot.
Well, okay, so you would know. So for people who are just tuning in, Andy is our lovely Canadian ambassador for our program. So and in fact, Andy, this is going to be educational for you because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about does not exist in Canada. So we're going to give
you... North Carolina does not exist in Canada.
Well, I'm speaking in particular about things that are uniquely American, like freedom capitalism. I know that Canada has a capitalistic system too, but you don't have freedom capitalism, which we have here. And there are some interesting little things that come about because of our unique brand of capitalism. So I have a story that kind of helps illustrate this.
Lay it on us.
Yes! So, so my son is grown. He's 24 years old, and he's been out of the house for a while. Full-time student, full-time worker. Full-time, both of these. So since he's been in the workforce for a number of years, he's been a temp. And for people who aren't familiar what that is most not most, but a high number of companies do not hire people directly. What they do is contract with a temporary agency, and that agency brings in employees on contract. So that contract could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever they negotiate. So they don't get benefits from the host company. They don't really get a whole lot of protections either. So the benefit is, in theory, the host company does not have to pay for sourcing of employees. They reduce costs on caring for those employees through 401 and health insurance and things like this. But what's supposed to happen is the temp agency, which acts as a legalized pimp in this case, at the end of that contract, if the host company wants to retain that temporary worker, they have to give kind of a balloon payment to buy out the contract. Okay, so that's how it's supposed to work. But creative freedom capitalism works a little bit differently. So while those are the established rules, what actually happens is you are promised a job with your host company after the term, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year. But typically what happens is all of a sudden there's a layoff, or you get fired, or something creative happens so that that host company doesn't have to buy out your contract, and you as an employee, you're kind of screwed. So this is, I've seen this with my son a couple times. And so he's pretty familiar with it. But something really interesting happened over the last week. So states in the United States are legalizing recreational cannabis. And in Illinois, it went non-criminalized in January. So my son, being a 24-year-old, he abstained from everything for a year, and he was trying to get hired on at his host company because he knew that they did testing and excluded cannabis use. They saw cannabis use on par with cocaine and heroin and everything else. So he abstained. And then when it came time to hire him on, his local HR person and then the corporate HR person, they said, "Oh yeah, no, don't worry about cannabis. It's fine. Not a problem. Don't worry about it. It's not a positive test. If it comes back, no problem." So the word got out between him and several other temps who were nearing the end of their contract date and were already interviewing and promised employment. So they all went for their drug tests after the 4th of July holiday, and they all came back with a positive cannabis hit. It was a hair test. Hair test, I think, it goes back 6 months of use, and anything you do comes back. So even then, HR said, "Oh, no, don't worry about it. That's not a positive. It's fine." But then one by one, on the day that these temporary workers were supposed to convert to employees, each one got a phone call from HR and said, "Oh, sorry, we made a mistake. HR and legal weren't really talking, and I'm sorry, you're on a 90-day suspension now." So that temporary worker, there are like 5 of them, 4 or 5 of them, are on a 90-day suspension without pay. And if they want to come back, they have to come back as temp workers, not as employees.
Too bad they're not police officers.
Right, that they would get paid administrative leave, basically a 90-day vacation paid. So the temp agency now is going to pursue some sort of remedy with their company, because if you can imagine, the pimp was planning on X number of dollars coming in from contract buyouts from these 5 people, and now they're not getting it either. So when my son and I talked about it, I said, well, let's go through the law here in Illinois. And here's where it got interesting. If your state has made cannabis legal for recreational use, you need to go back and read the law. Because what we found here in Illinois is it just decriminalizes it, but gave all of the rights and privileges to employers, not to employees. So what that meant is it effectively turned Illinois into a right-to-work state, and you have no recourse. So while the law at the top says that you cannot be, as an employee, it's your rights cannot be infringed, especially for medical use. Below that, it counteracts everything above it so that you can be fired without cause, just citing this this little piece of the legislation. So that was educational for him, because he got to find out that not only is the law not work the way he thought it did, but recourse, and we've discussed it here, the only recourse that he has available to him is to drop $40,000 to $60,000 on an attorney, which may or may not yield any positive results. So even the attorney that we talked to as part of this, he was like, yeah, justice is only if you can afford it. He said it flat out. So as a parent, I mean, I was disappointed, but it was a good lesson for my son here in the United States, in our freedom capitalism. These are good things to know, because we're raised that there's good and evil and right and wrong, and if somebody wrongs you, you have a remedy, but only if you can afford it. So 7 chimed in, where in Illinois? This is north of Chicago, about 30 minutes north of Chicago. So this law actually applies to the entire state. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Chicago proper or downstate in Champaign or Springfield or anywhere else. So That's how that happened. So I did some checking for the U.S. on temps, and I found something interesting. So this is from NELP, N-E-L-P, National Employment Legislative, whatever. I'm sorry. I'll post the link to their site. But in the U.S., over the last 10 years, we've seen almost a 4 times more growth in temporary work. So I thought that this was interesting because while you have employment numbers get fudged, right? If you can't get a job and you fall off, then it's like, hey, unemployment has gone down, when really it hasn't. So what we're actually seeing is a conversion from an actual employment relationship, employee-employer, to a temp agency. So it's astronomical. It's like 77% growth in 10 years. And then what happens on top of that is temporary agencies are in such competition. There are so many out there that they're driving down wages. So when they bid on a job, like if my son wants to go for a job, it's already been bid on by these companies who are competing with each other, which further drives down wages. This is part of the reason why we're seeing more people without insurance, more people without benefits, more people without retirement income, and more people without any of the social safety nets that you would expect from a vibrant workforce. So this is freedom capitalism at work here. And then it also goes to, we're Republicans, we're fighting for right to work legislation, and it wasn't really getting through in the States, so we've just flipped it now and allowed the free market to cannibalize the workforce.
Yes, the market will cure everything. We just have to give it time. It's been decades, but
right.
It'll fix itself, right?
Right.
And I come from a position where in 1987 I started as an electrician at a General Motors plant in Southern Ontario. And in 2017, after 30 years, I retired with full pension and, at age 51. And, that was the way, that was kind of towards the end, because I was still a part of a very strong union, Canadian Union, which is now called Unifor, which was renamed from the CAW, which is the Canadian version of the UAW in the United States, and it made sense for Canada to break away. But that was a job that allowed me to get to a place in my life at a fairly young age and retire, and now do what I'm doing now, what I want to do and what I enjoy to do, right? Which is now pretty much a pipe dream for the vast majority of people in North America anyways, right? And we've seen that, we've seen why, and there's been arguments saying, and at that time, previous to my hiring and up to my hiring, was that, well, if you hire people as full-time and you're going to take the time to teach them their jobs, give them the skill set to do their jobs properly and make them good employees, and then they become experienced professional workers, why not keep them, right? But then after a certain amount of time, it, was deemed by corporations not worth doing that anymore, right? Because we've seen the erosion of workers' rights, and, with neoclassical economics in NAIRU, which is the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, I believe.
Good job,
which basically says that if unemployment drops below a certain theoretical number, that the earth will explode and we're all going to die, right? And so and I'll credit Ellis Whittingham with that line. And so what's happened is that because there are always unemployed people, and not just non-skilled unemployed people, there are skilled unemployed people everywhere in society. So there's always a pool of unemployed people that corporations can hold over your head to say, well, look, you can't demand anything from me because I'm just going to get rid of you, or make laws or defang unions so that I can get rid of you and just hire somebody else, because there's always going to be someone looking for a job, which is why unemployment is a political choice. And we know that. We've seen that. MMT tells us that. Right? And so that is the reason why corporations do that now, right? They just cherry pick people for a short period of time. They don't have any legacy costs, and legacy costs are costs that corporations incur when people retire and they have to pay a pension, or they have to pay, health benefits or whatever. And then at the end of that, they're done. And then you have an entire population of people when it's retirement age, which I believe is now 67, right? Which is interesting because the average age of Americans, I believe, is around 78. So you get to enjoy, on average, 11 years of fun after 50 years of working, but that's only if you can afford to.
Well, not just if you can afford to, are you able to? Because here in the U.S., we cannot afford to access medical care either, even with insurance. So if you're not maintaining your instruments and getting things fixed when you should, you're not going to see that retirement age anyway. And I thought what was interesting is the rise of temporary workers precludes union protection, right? So any protection that you would have had as a union member and somebody who's qualified, trained, and we know that union members typically have higher training standards and have to pass more rigorous safety regulations than, say, a temp worker. So what we've done here with freedom capitalism is made people disposable, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's America, woo! So the theme of the show is about the woke youths, because and I'm not going to do the generalization on the zennials or whatever. It's I'm old, so anybody below the age of 46. So I'm considering all of those people. So this is everyone from high school who is going through the same bullshit that we're going through into college, and then their early working years, and then what's supposed to be the formative years of a career where you start building wealth. It's not there. It's not there. So, when you step back and take a look at this, when you have no rights and you are there to turn a wrench or be a cog in a wheel until someone else does, how do we not put this together with like Upton Sinclair in the Jungle? So if you haven't read it, I had to read it in school. If you haven't read it, it's a very, very small book, very short. Read it, because we're entering into that robber baron era where absolutely you are disposable to the oligarchs. And we recognize right now, we've had 3 independent university studies that show that we are not a representational republic anymore. We have entered into oligarchy. So yay, welcome. So this is what happens with temporary workers in the freedom market economy. So it was interesting for him. So what we're teaching him as parents is, number one, do not buy a house. I don't care what you do, do not buy a house. If you want to buy something that you own, you buy land. That's it. Do not buy a new car. I gave him my car, which is a 2005. And so he's putting maintenance into it to keep it running, and it's running like a champ, and that is still cheaper than a car payment overall. So the things that I was taught coming up, that you need to put your investment into a home and things, we're teaching, no, don't do any of that. Don't do any of that, because you need to be able to pick up and walk away at a moment's notice. Whether it's for a job or, hey, get your passport and immigrate out of this country. Whatever you want to do, do not buy a house, which is weird. for me.
And it's really, you know, the whole idea of student debt, right? Like, I mean, it's so unique because when we think of debt, we think of, you know, attaining something like, you know, a house, and you've got a mortgage, you know, or car, you've got a car payment, or whatever it is, right? Where you credit card, you've got credit card payments. That's what our generation thought of as debt. But when you think about the cost of an education, right, you are sending people out into the workforce that have nothing, right, that don't have any collateral of any kind. And they've already got, you know, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt without, you know, even the ability sometimes to go out and work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So with that, like with my son, what we did with him, and I'm not saying this is the right thing. It's all a crapshoot at this point because you're kind of like, well, is this going to work? Is it not? So far, it has worked. He's finishing his prereqs and will graduate with an associate's at a community college that cost us next to nothing. So he will graduate in January with zero debt. Now, here's the rub, right? Unless you're going through a specific program, like a double E or something like this, you're not guaranteed to make more than the temp worker working next to you who has an associate's degree. So we have bet that he will fare far better as a temp worker with no student debt, working his way through. And now he's on our insurance for the next 2 years because of ACA. After that, then he's going to have to buy his own policy on his own, and you know, I'll help him through that. But so he would be in a better position. And here's the other thing we did: we got a credit card when he was 16, and I co-signed it. And what we did was every year I'd buy a pair of socks and then pay it, or let it roll a couple months. So his credit rating now is better than most people my age. But
Right.
he
Right.
still can't get ahead, right? So he is in a position where he's done everything right and is still no better off than anyone else. So it just kind of, for him, having conversations with him, he's like, everything they said is a lie. And we're like, yes, now you're getting it. Now you understand. And what I find is amazing is that his experience is replicated millions of times over. And the response has been, you can take it two ways, right? If people, we've said this before, if people have nothing to lose, they're very dangerous, especially when you start pissing them off. And this is what we're seeing with the Black Lives Matter thing, right? Enough people have stood up and said, we're done, this will change, and we've got nothing left to lose. And then on the flip side of it, they're so damn snarky and hilarious that part of the way that they deal with the stress is to push back. And so I deeply enjoy the snarky ways that they have so far pushed back on everything. And I want to share some of those here. So the first one is apparently Jeff Bezos is being mourned heavily on Twitter. RIP Jeff Bezos is trending, and the reason for this is everybody has decided that he's drowned in the river, the Amazon River. Right, so it's a play on words. So if you go out to Twitter and you look up the hashtag RIP Jeff Bezos, you see all of this wonderful, creative, snarky bullshit about Jeff Bezos, who is now the world's first multi-trillionaire or some crap.
I would have thought that he would have more likely died in an avalanche of his money.
That's right, like Scrooge McDuck. Entire pile comes right down. Yes, exactly. So that's one of the ways they're dealing with it. The other one I thought was just absolutely hilarious was TikTok. So they've used TikTok again to go after Trump's re-election campaign, and this I thought was hilarious. So what they did was share TikTok videos saying that if you go out to his store, and Andy, this picture that I have up, You'll love this. This is a little bit of a hidden puzzle. What's wrong with this picture? I pulled this just so that I could show you this picture. But the headline is TikTok activists actually shutting down Trump's merch stores with abandoned shopping carts. So this is from The Verge. The Verge says it's not true. TikTok users say it is absolutely true. So what they've done is they went out to his merch store, filled their carts, and then never checked out. So what they were implying is that they were making sure that inventory was not available for people who really wanted to purchase things. So they were tying up the store, kind of a denial of service, and costing the Trump campaign money in doing so. So Verge says it's not true, but however, Trump yesterday was talking about banning TikTok. Like, right? So he's like, and these
There are absolutely no bounds to his power.
right. Well, I don't
President, I'm going to ban oxygen.
exactly. Well, the reasons that he said was, well, it's a Chinese-owned company, and because of COVID, they are bad. And I'm like, really? It had nothing to do with TikTok and your store, really? So I think he's getting pawned by TikTok daily, and I think it's kind of wearing on him a little bit. But Andy, can you see this picture that I put up?
Yes.
Do you see what's wrong with it?
Hang on one second. I'm going to have to expand it. So
Okay.
it takes a few minutes to. Oh, it's still kind of small.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a hint. The everyone who's working this little merchandise booth, I believe it's at like one of his events and rallies, they're all wearing masks and a face shield on top of, their Make America Great Again hats. Except one individual in the middle has the mask pulled below his nose.
Oh no.
Yes. I was like, well, wait a second.
Oh.
I was like, oh no.
That guy, if he's not careful, he's going to be campaign manager.
Right. Even what was it, Eric's wife? One of the Donald Jr. people, their girlfriend, spouses, or whatever, has tested positive, and she was being all huggy and lovey-dovey with the South Dakota governor, which I was like, ooh. So if you worked on the South Dakota governor's staff over the last week after the 4th of July, seriously, put that mask on, because yeah, it's going to spread. So, so I thought that was funny. But the other thing that happened, and this also affects the Yuts, was okay. So colleges and universities are trying to balance out. You got the coming year, classes are supposed to start in August. So a lot of them are going to a complete 100% virtual online class schedule, which is fine. I applaud that. And again, going back to my son, he's been doing that for the last year. So nothing changed for him. And a lot of people adjust well, because if you're younger and you're working first shift, second shift, third shift, you can go to class on your schedule when you feel like it. And we know that the younger you are, that you tend to sleep in later and stay up later. So it just works.
Brain.
Yeah, it just works. So a lot of universities are doing this, but again, freedom capitalism, you're not getting a discount on your tuition. If, like, let's say you're going to a state school or an Ivy League school and you're paying that heavy tuition, which includes room and board, you're not going to get a discount on that. You're just going to get access to their online classes. So you're still going to have to pay the regular tuition fee, which doesn't really seem fair. But then MIT and Harvard got really pissed off by a new policy that came out. So this one, let's see if I can put this up, y'all. Okay, so this one, I saw this tweet, and they were talking about how ICE took the online pledge from universities, and ICE decided, well, if you're on an F1 or an M1, M like Mary, student visa, and you are in the United States as a student, and your university goes to online courses, you must leave the country. Because they're arguing that, well, you can take those online courses anywhere, right? So MIT and Harvard were pissed. And I did have to check this out and see if it was true. So here's the page from U.S. Immigration Services, and it actually says, students attending schools operating entirely online may not take a full online course load and remain in the United States. So this affects primarily Ivy League schools who have a high number of F1 and M1 student visas. So when you look at what the cost of this is going to be, like if I'm a student here from India or France or something like that, and I'm trying to get a good Harvard education, but I can't live here, but I still get to pay the $50,000 a year tuition, maybe I'm going to look at a different university like Oxford in the UK. So when I priced this out and I looked at how many F1, just the F1 visas that we have issued as a country, and it's about 396,000 of them.
Oh, so it's just a few.
Just a few. So that translates into well over $18 million worth of revenue that is brought in from these students to colleges and universities here in the United States per year. So MIT and Harvard, who are some of the biggest beneficiaries of these visa programs, are now suing the Trump administration for this new policy. So
yeah, I would say that this would be something fairly easily overturned by the ACLU. It could be you have a document, a government document in your hands, a visa saying that you can stay in the country for this amount of time, and you provided you are going to said school, right? And if it's your choice to leave as a student, physically going to that school and do online courses, I can see an argument for that. But if it's the school's choice, that's not your fault, and so you should be able to stay.
Oh, absolutely. So let's take a look at like Indiana, where you have Ball State University and Purdue. These are really good agricultural and engineering schools, state schools. And as a resident of Illinois, you enjoy the sales and use tax that these F1 visa carriers spend in your state. That offsets the taxes that you as a U.S. citizen have to pay for the same services that you enjoy as a taxpayer. So what's going to happen? You're either going to have to cut services, or you are going to have to pay more because that bill's not going to go away. So there's all of these secondary and tertiary effects that come as a result of a policy like this, right? And then it also means that our universities here lose the prestige. So if I'm Oxford, or I'm a good university in Germany, and my apologies to Germany, I can't think of one off the top of my head, and I'm in marketing, oh boy, I am going to talk about how shitty universities are in the United States and how we are complementary and in fact better, and welcome all of these people in whenever possible. So
yes, and including, if I may shamelessly plug, University of Toronto or Laval in Quebec, or any of the prestigious Canadian universities that would be more than happy to take students from the U.S.
Mm-hmm. And I can't help but, you're right. I can't help but think that this is more of a war on education, right? So we've already talked about the war on employees, and now we're going to go into this whole mindset that science bad, education bad, liberal universities. No, they're not liberal universities. They're teaching facts. And if you are going to characterize them as liberal, what you're actually saying is you as a conservative do not deal in facts. And if that's the argument you want to make, then go for it. Do it. But to say that education is bad, so to me, I just kind of feel like that noose is just getting a little tighter every day. So speaking of nooses getting tighter every day, we had covered Monday a little bit about how now everyone in the US is grounded. We can't go to Europe. Canada's closed the border and Mexico has closed the border. So we are now completely nationalists because the rest of the world does not want us to move. And so I pulled out a map to kind of highlight this. And here it is. So the US now has 3 million COVID cases. And here's what's interesting about this particular map. I'll see if I can move this over just a little bit so everybody can get a good look at it. You see all of this black space up here above the word Canada, and there's very little red. That means Canada doesn't have the number of cases we have. Look at the United States, how red that is. That is not a political red. Those are COVID cases right there.
Well, now hang on a second. I have to push back on that a little bit because I do check this on a daily basis. And the reason why the US is so red on that map is because of they actually are looking at the numbers county to county, right? So all of that red are just smaller dots in counties based on how many cases on that level, because Johns Hopkins is based in the United States. Because there's only one dot per province, that's as far down as you can drill down on the Canadian map. Right?
I get it, Andy, but I hate to argue with you, but I'm gonna. You're not even.
No, I'm going to agree with you on the part that yes.
You're not even
in the top. There are a lot more cases in the United States, considering that we pretty much flattened out the curve, where the entire province of Ontario is now between the 100 and 150 new cases per day. And 2 days ago, we had our first day since late March of no deaths.
Right.
COVID. So I do agree with you there.
Well, yeah. So you're not even in the top 20 in Canada. And even Mexico, that has closed our southern border, is 7 behind us. So I think that even the visual itself is striking, and you're right, maybe not as good of a map as you could have for the data, but the numbers themselves going down the side, you can't argue with those. And then I don't know of any other country that is making the argument that, well, if you test more, you're going to have more positive cases. That seems to be a U.S. construct. Because you test to identify cases. There's nothing political about testing, as far as I know. So, yeah. Let's see, what else? So then the other part of this that I want to talk about, and this is where I'm going to get on the youths just a little bit, is 4th of July. 4th of July. So the spike that we're seeing now, you remember back when we had all of those people who were crying and clapping and applauding, and all those people who lined up outside of hospitals in New York, and we love our doctors and we love our nurses, and we had so many doctors and nurses who were dying from viral load because they were trying to save lives. Well, this is from a doctor in New York, and he calls out everybody. He says, no amount of clapping or cheering or calling healthcare workers heroes meant a damn thing if you undo all our work with your shitty, irresponsible behavior now. And so he posted a picture of Cass County in New York and Coney Island, and you could see over the 4th of July holiday, people wall to wall across the beaches, in the water, just acting like nothing happened, right? So
Not a mask in sight.
nope, not a one. And this is what happened in Florida, which is why Florida is having such a massive problem right now. And so oh God, we are the slow kids. And my bingo card says that it's the lead in the water from our old pipes because we never replaced our old pipes. So you have
And don't forget about yellow paint.
well, there's that, yeah. So I believe that because we have not made the investments in our infrastructure, and I'm telling you, I travel overseas. I grew up overseas, but then traveled overseas just like 2 years ago, and went to the UK. And I traveled there with a girlfriend of mine, and I was so mad every time that we would take public transport. Like we took a ferry from Ireland to Scotland and we were taking the trains, and it would make me so mad because you get on a train in Scotland and it was what they called a crappy station, a crappy train, and I'm like, if this train pulled up in Chicago, I would weep. It smelled like strawberries, Andy. He got on and there was like, it smells clean and it's beautiful and it's nice and it's clean and it's modern, and you could plug in any type of gadget that you could think of, and there were little work tables and the bathroom was just delightful. I'm in Chicago where most people take public transport to get into the city to and from work. I swear to you, those trains are from the 60s and they're horrible. I mean, I love public transport, but I'm like, it made me mad because they have been investing in their people and their infrastructure, and we haven't for so long. Like, drive on a Wisconsin road, drive on a Chicago high. Well, Chicago's different. We have the mafia, and so they have contracts for the roads, so we will always have repairs on our roads. But if you drive just across the border from Illinois to Wisconsin, you know without a sign you've hit Wisconsin because there's all sorts of patching and potholes. Indiana's the same way. Indiana does not have high-speed internet. They sell it. They sell it as such, but it's not. It's just so ass backwards. Like when my husband goes to Indiana, he can't use a cell phone because they don't put up towers and they don't maintain the towers that they have. But it's 2020. So I believe that it is the lead in the water that is making so many stupid people.
Welcome to the United States, where there is actually a car air freshener scent of urine.
It was so funny because I have a friend who is Canadian and was raised by a Nigerian stepfather, and he used to tell me this song. When you go to Nigeria, I don't know if it's true or not, he could have been just joshing me, but when you get off the plane in Nigeria, it's like, welcome to Nigeria, water problem in Nigeria. Like, they just give you the rundown on what's wrong in Nigeria as a tourist you should know about. And I'm like, we should sing this song now for people who come to the U.S. It's ridiculous.
It would be ridiculously long.
That's right. It
would be like the live version of Deep Purple's Space Trucking.
Yeah. So I think this is part of where our problems stem from, that we have so many glue eaters in our class. That
consistently no skin on their tongue because they kept touching their tongue to the frozen surface.
Or the batteries, testing batteries that way.
Yes,
yeah. So I think, and this is why we have such a pushback on education and science and things that keep you healthy and alive. We're in trouble. So I applaud everybody who's trying to use a sense of humor to get through this. I wouldn't. I don't have another solution. I mean, we're all going to hell in a handbasket here in the U.S., but we're going to have a good time doing it. So, yeah. So that kind of wraps up my rant for today. A salute and admonishment of our youth, our Yuts here in the United States. So, Yeah, I'm trying to think. We still have a big announcement coming. I think we're gonna get to that Friday, and then Andy, you just wrapped up production on series of interviews.
Yes, I just wrapped up a 2-part series of interviews with Dan Whitfield, who is running for he's running for Congress in
You can do it.
our Kansas
Arkansas. There are just too many vowels in that, but you don't pronounce them. So Arkansas. Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be coming out this week at some point, and this is absolutely a gentleman that people need to keep their eye on, because he's in it for the right reasons, and he has the proper progressive policies in his pocket, and he's running as an independent, right, which is unheard of.
Mhm.
And so he has so much to teach us on how to properly run as an independent and make it, because he certainly does sound like he's got his head on straight and he's doing the right things. Of course, you know, the one-party system, 1A and 1B, are trying to eliminate the competition by pulling fast ones on everybody. So they're telling the problems that he's faced trying to get signatures during the pandemic, and was not allowed to have an extension, although, you know, basically everybody was in lockdown. So that's a very interesting story as well, and how he's is fighting it, and it looks like he's got a good chance, and that's very encouraging.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, he's running for the Senate seat against Tom Cotton. And if you are, as of yet, not familiar with how batshit crazy Tom Cotton is, he makes Trump look sane. So go and look up the best quotes of Tom Cotton. This guy is nutty. He was advocating having the National Guard fire upon U.S. citizens. What was his quote? It was something about no quarter and kill them all. So that's Tom Cotton.
Yeah, those stories of him getting campaign contributions and spending his contributions on paying off local and state officials and having them, you know, eliminate his competition. It's as I've always said, we know there's corruption. It's the level that always surprises us.
That's exactly right. And so I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the website is replacetomcotton.com. So check out Dan.
Right. And Brandon's idea was effective, but certainly not G-rated. So
right, exactly.
I'll let Brandon explain when you see the interviews his campaign statement wanted to be, and you know, just
so
it's appropriate, but it's just not PG. So.
Right. So we'll have those come out, I think, Thursday and Friday, tomorrow and Friday. So tune into those, and then we will be back here on Friday. May have actually a guest on Friday. This is a gentleman from downstate Illinois that I happen to run into. He's an attorney. He's an attorney and a professor at SIU who wanted to talk about money, in particular the Fed. So I'm going to touch base with him today and see if maybe we can get him on, depending on what his class schedule is. I don't think his classes have started just yet, so maybe we will get him in Friday, if not maybe Monday. And then, yeah, so stay tuned, but I think that's it for us. Any parting words, Andy, that people should know about?
No, I think that the one thing I did want to see is that was watching New Jersey results come in yesterday, and we had a number of progressive candidates that were running, and let's all remember that these are not your fathers and grandfathers elections, these happen over time because of the pandemic and the number of absentee ballots or balloting coming in, right? So these numbers are going to change, and typically the people that vote absentee are not the same as the ones that go out to the polls. So we have to wait and see. Now, of course, we are talking about the Democrats. So
there's no snark in that at all. Oh, one thing I did forget is this evening at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, there is Ellie from the Organizing the National Progressive Party will have some updates. So speaking of Dems and shenanigans with elections and corruption, there is work being done to make an alternative for progressive voters. These are for independents, progressives. We welcome the people on the right who recognize that the right has gone batshit crazy and Democrats have joined them. If you're Dem-Inter, tune in. It's still progressive policy. So it will take a strong coalition from all sides in order to start flipping things. So that's this evening on Facebook, on Organizing National Progressive Party. Check out that page. So
and keep your eye on that group, because they're now got both feet below them and pushing upwards very hard. And Ellie's a wonderful organizer, and things are going to start happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
We have the motto there is, "We will fight for you because we are you, and they can't shoot us all."
It's like the Area 51 storm. They can't stop us all. So, and that's kind of what it's going to take. Keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So whether you're Dem-Inter coming in from one side or a Dem-Exit coming in from a solid national progressive party, this is how we make the change, and we are running out of time. So we need all hands on board. So with that, we're going to get out of here, and we'll be back on Friday, bright and early, 10 a.m., where I hope that we are ready to start rolling out our big announcement, big project plans for the near future. So that's it for me. And Andy, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's dull without you. So
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
all right, everybody. We'll see you on Friday. Thanks.
Take care.